Good morning. My name is Stacy Kopsha. I'm a member of your Board of Trustees and I use she, her pronouns. We are having some technical difficulties and speaker issues, so just bear with us this morning. Long time.
And if you can't hear, please move forward. Like it's on you. If you can't hear, come forward.
Let's see. So I welcome you here today, longtime members and new visitors alike. You're welcome here. And can they see me online?
I don't know.
Okay, if you can see me online, welcome. And if you can't, you'll be there soon, I hope. Let's see. So we are one people of many beliefs, many sexualities and genders, and love is the power that holds us together. You are all, we're all learning, growing, and you are all loved. And you're all welcome here, just as you are. Let's see. For the online people, there is a chat chaplain. Bob Hayes is the chat chaplain. Oh, is it working?
They've been hearing you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, Bob Hayes is directing you online. Let's see. If you look on our order of service, you'll see our e-news and our website, tahomauu.com. And if you're not registered to receive e-news, please sign up so you can see what's going on. There's lots of things going on. I will highlight a few. I think the biggest is our pledge drive, which is happening. And I believe the latest news update is from yesterday that we're at 50% of our goal. And we need that finalized. We need the pledges in as soon as possible because our board meeting is this Thursday and the board has to vote on next year's budget. And so if you haven't turned in a pledge, I encourage you to do so as soon as possible. There's hard copy forms which you need to turn in, and they're in the back of the sanctuary. Thank you. And they just get deposited in the admin, Lauren, in her door in the hall. And let's see. That's another announcement. There is a board meeting this Thursday. Board meets every third Thursday of the month from 6:30 to 9 up here in the sanctuary. It's open for anyone to come. And I encourage people to come. I think the board tends to be, this entity of unknown, but it's just, I'm a member and it's just people like you who meet and are trying to do the best for our church. So if you're curious of what happens, stop by for 10 minutes or 20 minutes and just see what it's about. We will have an annual congregational meeting June 9th, shortly after the service. It'll be here in the sanctuary. There will also be an online option as well. And we will be voting on approval of next year's budget, also the new members of the Board of Trustees and some other things. We do need a quorum, which is 30% of the membership. So I do encourage as many people to attend as can. Let's see. On next Saturday, May 18th from 9 to 2, there's a spring spruce up that Cindy Hackett is pulling together just to make the outside grounds a little more attractive. So if you have work gloves and tools, just show up ready and able to help. There's refreshments and snacks. Just bring your own cup. See Cindy Hackett for more details. Save the date for the TUUC annual camping trip. David Pettit is putting that on, and it is August 16th through 18th. And I encourage you to go. I went for the first time last year. You don't have to be a camper. You don't have to have any equipment. I had none of that, and I was well cared for, and it's a good time. So you can stay for one night, 2 nights, or just show up for the day. But stay tuned for more information. Let's see. Third Friday potluck is this Friday, May 17th from 11:30 to 1. It's downstairs in the social hall. Jocelyn Brown from Pierce County Harvest is speaking. Just a plug for her. I've been involved with Pierce County Harvest. They have a gleaning program. They have lots of great volunteer opportunities and do a lot for the community in terms of food justice and equity. So that would be an interesting one to attend. Not that they all aren't. And let's see. New members. I welcome you for coffee and refreshments after the service. If you're a new visitor, use a red mug and we'll know to come and talk to you. And my land acknowledgement, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from the land of the Coast Salish people, including the Puyallup Tribal Nation, land from which they were forcibly displaced. I affirm the continued sovereignty of the 574 federally recognized troops, including the 29 here in Washington State. And I support those still fighting for federal recognition. I acknowledge the theft, the violence, the trauma, the racism that the Indigenous people have experienced over the history and from the colonizers since 1492, continuing to the present day. I honor the resiliency of the Indigenous people and stand with them as they continue to fight for their land, their water, visibility, and their existence. Good, okay. Lastly, I invite you to set your phones to worship mode. We're gathered here, one community together. Let's settle in, take a break from our busy lives. Take a deep breath if you can. And let us join together in worship. Good morning. I am Patty McPhee. I am I don't know, what am I? I'm your speaker this morning. I want to welcome all those of you who are mothers, have mothered, or are being mothered. The reality is that the people who bore us are not always the people who raised us. And yet we want to honor all of them, whether you're a male, a female, or somewhere in between. Each of us has been supported, loved, and honored. And let's take a moment to thank them for allowing us to be who we are. This morning's service has been titled a couple of things. It didn't start out what I've ended up calling it. But I believe that civil communication is something that has been lost in recent years, and I'd like to explore that.
Our opening words today are a poem by Patty McPhee, Even Best of Enemies. To know someone, to hear them, is to carry a bit of their soul in that special pocket your soul has emptied into them. You will carry it forever, even as the world changes them through choices, good and bad. You will know them from a time far away. They may stray from that bit of soul you hold, yet because you listened, you know them as they were. You become the holder of their light. That knowing, the time spent acknowledging their humanity, accepting and holding it, is soul expanding. It opens you up to see the whole human experience, riding in that pocket of in your soul. It opens up a new vision, allowing a whole new world of joy to form in your heart. You will never be the same. You will become more loving, joyful, wiser. Yes, by spending a moment, an hour to truly hear, know, and understand another is a step towards bringing peace in this broken world, one listening at a time. Even when we disagree, even when we argue, I hold that piece of you. For our chalice lighting today, I want to invite Teresa Hall to come up. I think this is the first time she's been invited to light the chalice. Thank you. She and Chuck signed the book last fall. She'd been coming for maybe a year plus before that. So thank you for joining us, Teresa and Chuck. Teresa is a mother, and in honor of all of us who have experienced that mothering, thanks for doing this, Teresa. And now in a real test of our technology, we're going to see if the slides appear. If not, we're going to remember these. Hey, it works. Okay. What do we say together now? We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. And now for our opening hymn, we are going to sing together number 123, Spirit of Life. So please rise in body or spirit.
There we go. Okay. This is not for you guys. This is for those poor souls on Zoom. So understand that. I would like to invite all those of you who are young or young in spirit or don't mind sitting on the floor to come up and join me in a story. I have a story to tell. I know, that's very nice, Clara. Okay, now we're going to need to be quiet because the people out there can't hear me very well, but you guys can, right? Okay. Today, we're going to talk about friends. How many of you have ever had to go to a new school? Or maybe you went to a new church or a new daycare? All of these things, did you find that it was kind of scary when that happened? Some of you weren't scared at all, but some of us are. It makes us kind of afraid. Well, Sally was going to a new school and she was afraid. Her mother was in the Army and she had changed schools before and she knew what it could be like. Sometimes there were kids who would tease her and say mean things, and she would have to make all new friends again, and that was very hard. And she felt kind of shy, so sometimes it was hard. That first day at her new school, no one talked to her at all. She wanted to cry. And then she wanted to say mean things to them so they would feel bad like she did. But she didn't do that. She decided she would call her Nana. Does anybody else call their grandma Nana? Yeah, my grandma was Nana. So she called Nana. She knew Nana would feel sorry for her and say nice things. And Sally was sure of that. But when she talked to her, Nana asked her if she'd been nice to those people. And she didn't know what to do. And Nana said, "Did you ask them what they like? Or how long they had lived in that area? Did you ask them where the good places were for ice cream? Did you ask them about their pets? Or if they like to ride ponies like you do?" Sally realized she didn't know anything about the children that she was going to school with. So when she went to school the next day, she had a whole list of questions she was going to ask. When she asked each kid, they listened, and then they started to talk to her. She learned so much that school became her favorite. And when she got older, many of those people who she thought were mean became her very best friends. Nana was right. All she needed to do was to ask questions, listen to the answers, which is sometimes the hard part, and then she would be able to understand them. She didn't have to agree with them, but if she understood, they would not be enemies, but they would be friends. Does that sound like a good idea to you? Is that something you can try and do? Well, the adults today are going to learn about asking questions. Sometimes it's even harder to ask questions when you're an adult because you think you know the answers. This is an ongoing problem for adults, so we could probably learn something from you guys. So, if everybody could stand and make an arch for the children, we will sing them down to their classes. That's okay.
Hide in the back room because I'm the chat chaplain, but with technical difficulties, you get to see the chat chaplain this morning. So this is the time of our offering, and I know for Patty and I, every day we come here, every Sunday is a little bit different. Some we're feeling really good and want to share with people, and other times maybe things haven't gone well, and we need the strength and the energy that all comes from being here. This is the opportunity for you to help this church keep being here for the people that need it on a daily basis, those of us that show up here pretty regularly on a Sunday and share our goods and our services and our knowledge and our love with the other people of this congregation. There will be baskets passed around for those of you in the sanctuary, for those of you online. There are multiple ways for you to be able to make your dedication to the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann, and thank you all. Just a reminder, our house speakers are not working today. If you can't hear the person speaking from up here, just come forward a little bit. I think you can hear in the front row. All right, let's dedicate our offerings, these words from the Reverend Bill Graves. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls. And now for our meditation hymn, number 347. The words will be on screen. Please rise in body or spirit. And thank you, Susan.
I want to thank Scott for that reading of my poem. I wrote that not too long ago for reasons that may be obvious to some and maybe not so obvious to others. The reality is the way we communicate, the way we are in the world seems to have changed. I have been reading, I'm a voracious reader and I love to listen to books. Unfortunately, I don't always buy the books that I listen to. So that you think that should be fine, except for if you're starting to put together a sermon, and some of my friends out here who have done that, you need to be able to pick those words up, not try and dictate that, use them as dictation, because inevitably you're going to get something wrong. Because the speakers don't always speak the exact things that they wrote. It gets really bad, but there are some books that I have been reading, and if you're interested on this topic, these are a couple of books that I would suggest. The first one is by a local author. His name is Eric Liu. He is of Chinese descent, and he lives in Seattle. He started the Civic Saturday sermons, which were held in 2016. And they created a series of sermons on civic issues. And one of the sermons that he gave, he talked about a conversation that he had with a Southern gentleman who was a Republican and ardent Trump supporter. Now, Eric is none of those things. In fact, he was a speechwriter for Bill Clinton. But he found that by listening, truly listening to the concerns of this other person, that he started to realize that it wasn't a black and white issue. It was multicolored, multi-layered, and there was misunderstanding on both sides. That was the first book, is the book that he wrote entitled Become America. And it's a series of the Civic Saturday sermons that he gave in the Seattle area. Highly recommended. And if you get it on Audible, then you get to hear his voice and talking about that entire process. The other author is a gentleman by the name of Malcolm Gladwell. He writes for a lot of national publications, including the New York Times, the New Yorker magazine, and many others. And he wrote a book entitled Talking to Strangers. Highly recommend that every human being should read this book, because we tend to assume we know what the other person means. We tend to think that all body language is universal. It's not. It's taught. And we think everybody is going to respond the same way. And then stop and think about what happened to poor Amanda Knox in Italy, because she was an immature 22-year-old. She did not respond the way the Italian judge felt she should, and ergo she must be guilty of murder. Literally, there was no evidence against her. She spent 5 years in an Italian prison when there was evidence of someone else doing the murder, because the judge was sure that he understood what she meant by how she acted. How many times are we guilty of similar judgments? I think we need to reframe our dialogues as we venture out into the larger world to get the best possible result from a discussion with those whose opinions differ from yours. Your best opening every time is a question. I want to put a caveat on here. There are two ways to ask the same question. Basically. So I'm going to use the universal and very best question there is. It is the simplest question in the book. And I'll give you a couple of ways to ask it. Why? Or why? Totally different meaning, and the response will be totally different. But if you ask why, with the desire to understand, you'll get a whole different response. Remember what I mentioned to the children. It's about asking the right questions too. We want to bring this world to balance, not to agree with everybody, because that's not going to happen. But we need to be able to listen. We want to be heard. Isn't that true? Isn't that what so much of our problem today that we feel is an issue is we're not being heard? I put it to you, are you listening? Not listening to judgment, but just listening to understand. There's specific questions that can be asked, and they need to be asked without that confrontational style, but with one that indicates a true desire to understand. Let's talk about some of these questions. To seek is always to question. It always begins with a question. And I put it to you that if, when you hear someone expound on something that seems to you totally without merit, take a deep breath and ask why. That's interesting. Why do you feel that way? What is it in your life that brought you to this moment? You don't know what their life has been. And without that knowing, any judgment that you make will be wrong and will be hurtful. It will be all the things that you're blaming them for. We do not want our lack of curiosity to lead to a barrier between us. Walls never solve anything, whether they're real or just part of our mindset. Those two books that I mentioned, those authors talk at length about our responsibility. And I've been hearing this a lot lately, and I don't know if we think about it enough. We're Americans, most of us in this room. Most of us in this room probably were born here. Have you ever talked to a naturalized citizen about what it took, what the process was like, what they learned, how long it took? It takes years to get through the naturalization process. Trust me, any naturalized citizen knows more about this country than you know with 12 to 18 years of education. And they understand it in their hearts in a way that we don't. I am going to make some blanket statements, and I'm okay if you come back on me after the service and say, whoa, but I don't want you to come at me without honest reflection. because I'm speaking for me, but what I have seen out in the larger world is this is pretty universal. We don't focus calmly on their experience. We want to be seen and understood without having to watch and understand. And we might be right. We may have the best answer. But I will say that those who come to this country and put up with the enormous hurdles we put in front of them and stand their ground, they're never going to miss voting, ever. How many of us have either intentionally or accidentally not voted at some election or another? A school board election or a proposition election. Many of us have done that, either accidentally or just because it wasn't worth it. Voting is not a right. Voting is a responsibility. Learning what your neighbor truly believes and why is not a right. It's your responsibility. If you disagree with your neighbor, it is your responsibility to find out why. Why do they believe that way? What is it that has happened in their life to create that belief system? And I will tell you that you can become the one thing that grounds them and lets them see something that's different. And maybe you will see the world differently too. You mustn't fear that. And I'm afraid as a liberal thinker that I sometimes go into the world with this. I'm not going to listen to those conservative voices. And if I go back and I look at where that's coming from, it's coming from a fear that they might have some point that's valid. Oh no, you mean they really know something that I didn't know? Yes. They have a different view of the world. It's not wrong. It's just different. Things that have happened to them are not the things that have happened to you. And they're not going to listen to your view of the world until you're willing to listen to theirs. Someone has to be the first one to ask why. Asking questions and not judging is probably some of the hardest work that I do in my daily life. I'm constantly writing poetry for that very reason, because it reminds me in the moment that I have a responsibility in this world. I need to remember that closing point in my poem, and always remember I hold a piece of you in that special pocket in my soul. And remind that other person that they hold your piece in their soul too. By being open and listening to them, you create a connection in this world that will allow a path to grow and develop in which we can cross over. We can view the world in 3 dimensions instead of 1. We can understand, even if we don't agree. And in reality, isn't that what you want? Isn't that all you want, is to be understood? I don't always need to be agreed with. But if you're going to disagree with me, you better understand what you're disagreeing about. That's a valid request on my part. I have to honor that for them too. Do any of you have conversations with yourself in the car? Ah, good. I'm not alone there. Yeah, I like to take thoughts, especially if I'm angry, at some voice on the radio or somebody I've been talking to, and I air out my thoughts. And I have these amazingly adept conversations with them. I mean, I put my case forward. I am so erudite and perfect. Their defenses crumble. Doesn't always work so well in real life. But what I have taken to doing recently is asking myself the questions that I'm talking about having you ask today. And this is what I'm going to ask. I'm going to leave you with. What are the questions you ask yourself? What clarification are you requesting from yourself? Okay, so I did this the other day. I had gotten very angry about the pro-choice, pro-life debate. I felt it had gotten out of hand. It was stupid. There were some really ridiculous thoughts. I mean, totally out there. And so I had a conversation with myself and this phantom opponent in the car. I'm sure the other drivers on the road probably were sure I had either having a really violent conversation on the telephone or that they had to call the police and get me some mental health work. Probably either one of those would not be out of line. I realized that I had to think beyond my own box in this conversation. And I started to realize that if I were to start asking questions, I might get some answers that were unexpected. And as I kind of went through my head on that conversation, I realized one of the questions I wanted to ask them was, you're pro-life. Okay, that's fabulous. I'm pro-life too. That's why I want universal health care, because I'm pro-life. So I'm assuming that that's what you want. Now, I'm pro-life, but I'm also adamantly pro-choice because I'm pro the life standing in front of me. And I realized that to ask them, as someone who is pro-life, how are we going to handle the pro-living issues? It's one thing to be pro-life. It is something entirely different to be pro-living. I realized I had probably taken the time to get to a deeper understanding. And now I could explain my own point of reference in a way that they would understand. I was making a choice to think outside of my own easily mushy thinking and take it back into something that was solid and understandable. If you're pro-life, then you are pro-healthcare, pro-universal food and housing. You have to be, you can't not want that. That then would create a conversation about the true issues. And I could learn more. Maybe I could teach, but my goal was not to teach, it was to learn. I was raised in a very fundamentalist community. However, there was always one scripture that stuck in my mind. You shall have no other gods above me. I always liked that one. And it wasn't until I became an adult I realized, by definition, that says there are other gods. Who knew? You know? Yes, that is what it says. And that is what it means. I will tell you, that didn't go over very well with my very fundamentalist family. But it was food for thought. At least I could throw it out there and laugh. The interesting other point is that I grew up in the 50s and 60s. Fundamentalist Christianity was pretty rampant in those days too. But I will have to tell you, the biblical teachings were different. There weren't different words. It wasn't different stories. The mindset around those stories was different. It was about the metaphor and the parable. It was about teaching life lessons, not specific, this is what you do. It was about, this is how you do. It was about the Good Samaritan. You do not judge this person. They are kind. That is the point. We all need to take a step back and recognize that we are creating a class that the Israeli people had created of the Samaritans and the other. We are creating the other. And the minute we do that, we stop seeing their humanity. Christ used that story, Jesus used that story to describe the fact that everybody was a human being and had good. And they bring good to the world. Please avoid attacking others. They have reasons for their believing. And until you understand what those reasons are, until you ask the question why, until you ask yourself, what do I believe and why? You will be as much the problem as any possibility of being a cure for what this world really needs. I'll close with this. Words matter. Words make ideals real. They have the power to destroy, and they have the power to elevate. Words can wound so deeply that they're felt through the decades. The world did not say that I cannot have what I want. I did. The words I say to myself or to others will either empower or destroy. It is always a choice. Let's just take a minute to think about how we can take these words into this coming week. Our closing hymn is Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, number 361. And I want to thank Susan for leading the singing today. All I want to ask of each of you is to ask of each of them. Open your hearts, open your mind, and ask a question. You might be surprised at the answer. Scott will be extinguishing the flame after we say the flame extinguishing words that are coming up on the screen behind me. I'm supposed to say more things. Oh, it worked. We extinguished this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in our closing blessing song. From you I receive, to you I give, to you we share this sweet. From you I receive, to you I give, to you we share this sweet. Thank you, and join us for coffee and conversation, and lots of questions too.